pushed by gas. The liquid is in the keg. It's either beer or wine or root beer, whatever it may be. To get from in that keg that's sitting down here up to the tap, gas pressure is pushing it through the system. So the only two components of a keg system is gas and liquid, whatever it may be, the beverage that we're selling. So there's nitrogen is used to push wine, and CO2 is used to push anything that's carbonated, be it bubbly wine, root beer, or beer.
Or cider.
Cider, yep. Good point. So they're split into two separate systems essentially within the coolers, and there's two separate tanks that feed them. And in that system up front there, those two gases are interrelated on the beer side of things. So beer uses a little bit of nitrogen as well, details that we don't need to know, but you do have to have both those tanks hooked up for beer to work. So the tanks themselves have a pressure gauge on them, which we can take a look at in here, here inside. Not yet. There's two gauges on here. So when I turn this tank on, there's a valve on top. Counterclockwise is always on. They're marked open. So in these, you turn them all the way open. There's a high pressure and a dispensing gauge. So the one gauge goes up to 3,000 pounds. The one goes up to 60. So there's 3,000 pounds of pressure or up to that in the tank. And that's basically like your fuel gauge. So it's showing how full the tank is. Then the serving pressure is what's actually pushing through the system to push the liquid out of the lines. And none of these ever really need to be adjusted by anyone once we get it all dialed in. So if there's a problem, you can look at the high pressure gauge. If it's on 0, that's your problem. There's no pressure to push anything. If there is pressure here, then the problem is somewhere else. And usually that happens if someone messes with something, because it's pretty foolproof for the most part. If it never gets touched, nothing ever changes, and it typically works.
And is that the is that the nitrogen or?
This one's CO2.
Okay,
They are labeled.
Oh.
Yep.
It's dark, but they are.
Yep. Kind of hard to see in here. So I'll shut that off because we're not using it. But if we're going to sneak more people in here.